Welcome to this week's episode of the Declutter 360 podcast. I'm Lauren Diekman, a certified home organizer and mindset coach who's created this space that is dedicated to helping you unlock your potential to live an organized life once and for all. Are you ready to get organized from all angles? Let's dive in. Hello, my friend. Welcome to another episode of the Declutter 360 podcast. I'm your host, Lauren Diekman, and I'm so glad you're joining me today. We're here in 2025. And yes, we had a week off from episodes last week. Here in my area, we had what some would consider a big snowstorm. Other areas of the country would probably, just kind of shrug at this, but we got just shy of a foot of snow one day, and then we got a little bit more snow later in the week. And as a result, my children did not go to school all week last week. And so I spent a little bit of time last week really thinking about actually what we're going to be talking about this week. How do I spend my time on any given day, but especially when, things maybe don't go the way that I planned. And so I have to stop and make adjustments and do things a little bit differently than I had hoped or intended to do. Right. And so, when things get thrown in your way or into your path, I don't want to say in your way, but in your path, right? And it could be something like a snow day or 5 consecutive snow days that, by the way, were also attached directly to their winter break. So yes, my children had not been to school since the middle of December, and I think we were all ready for them to go back this week. Yes, even my boys. But it could be snow days, it could be someone being ill, it could be that I fall ill, it could be weather related, not necessarily snow, but whatever it may be. Things happen that can derail your intentions. As a matter of fact, things happen every single day. It's just on a different scale. Some of these things that step into your path are very small. Some of them may be a little bit larger, and you have to constantly make these adjustments, right? In real time. This is real life. This is real living, right? That we're constantly making these adjustments to how we are showing up in our lives. And again, if you're a regular listener to this podcast, this is not going to be a foreign concept to you, but that idea of being truly firm in knowing where your priorities lie is so incredibly helpful in guiding you to be able to make the choices that you need to make to stay on the path you want to stay on. That doesn't mean that when something comes onto your path that you might not have to take a little side road, but choose to take that side road based on what your priorities are. If you are choosing to change your path, do that with purpose and intention. And all of this is kind of coming around in a roundabout way to talking with you a little bit about your word of the year. Okay, I know I've briefly mentioned the idea of New Year's resolutions, and here we're still in the month of January right now. And so this may be fresh in your minds. And if you're a member of my free Facebook community, you saw last week when I wasn't able to put out, I shouldn't say when I wasn't able to, when I chose not to put out an episode, right? Because I had an event, the snow event, step into my path, put my children in my path for the week. And I had to be really intentional and purposeful about my time. And there came a point where I was really wrestling with myself over that and whether or not I was going to have to kind of put my kids down in the basement and be like, be quiet for a minute so I can record a podcast. And I was like, you know what? That's not a priority for me is not to push my children aside. This podcast is a priority for me, but it lies in a different plane than my family. Right. And so I had to really allow those priorities to guide me last week in choosing not to put out a podcast episode, to be okay with not putting out a podcast episode so that I could choose to be present with my children more. Okay. And back to talking about that Facebook community, over in my free Facebook community, I instead hopped in and just did a really brief kind of live video where I got to chat a little bit about those priorities and about Quitter's Day. Quitter's Day this year was Friday, January 10th. Traditionally, what's known as Quitter's Day is the second Friday in January. And I don't know the percentage, but the idea is that by that second Friday in January, there's a huge percentage of people who have set New Year's resolutions who have already given up on them, who've walked away from their New Year's resolutions. And New Year's resolutions are not a bad thing. They're not like the be all end all rule either, right? It doesn't work for everybody, but it works for some people. And what I was sharing over there in the Facebook community was just this idea that we can choose to make resolutions anytime. We can choose to refocus on our intentions, refocus on our priorities at any time. And not just do we have that power and that responsibility to continue to choose and refocus, but we have that privilege to be able to continue and that responsibility to know that we're not always going to be able to stay the path that we want to stay. It's natural, it's human nature for us to stray from our path. There's all different kinds of temptations and circumstances and things that can interfere with our lives, with our paths, with what we want. That's just nature. But when you know that and you accept that, then you're aware of it and you know that you can be aware of when that's happening and when you need to refocus and pull yourself back to the path, pull yourself back to focusing in on what your priorities are, what your intentions are. And I have come to really love adopting a word of the year. And I will tell you that in 2024, it was the first time that I actually held on to a word of the year for an entire year. Crazy, right? Here's the thing. Here's the thing about a word of the year, okay? You want this word not necessarily to be centered around a destination. Instead, I want you to think of it a little bit differently because I think sometimes people get focused on, whatever they think this thing is that they're trying to attain, and they use their word to try to motivate them towards that. Okay. But instead of trying to reach a certain destination, I want you to think of your word of the year as more of a guiding principle or a theme or how you want to live this year, how you want to show up in the world in 2025. What does that look like for you? What does showing up in 2025 look like for you? And when you think about that, that word that you choose is going to help you focus those intentions and those priorities. Okay. But it serves then as almost a sort of anchor for you in that decision making that we were talking about earlier, so that when things come up and you're not sure You're asking yourself, what do I do now? Okay, great. This happened. Now what? This happened. Now what? You can come back to this word of the year because you know that that word is focused in on those priorities, those things that matter the most to you, and how you're going to show up in the world for those priorities this year. So it's going to help you, encourage you to continue to experience personal growth. And that, my friend, is exactly what a word of the year should do for you. Now, I mentioned that last year was the first time for me that I actually stuck with a word of the year the whole year. My word of the year last year resonated with me so deeply, and it came up for me so many times over and over and over again. I'm not even going to tell you what my word was. If you really want to know, come on over to the Facebook group and ask me. All right. How about that? The link to join the Facebook group, by the way, I know I've mentioned this group several times in this episode, is down in the show notes. So if you want to come join us, you haven't joined us yet. We've actually had quite a few folks joining us already in 2025. Come on over and join. Hop on in on the conversation. Feel free to throw up a post with your thoughts and questions, whatever you need or are looking for from the group. Go on in and be a part of it. Yeah. But, going back to choosing a word, I think when I think back to past years, prior years, before 2024, one of the reasons that I don't think my words stuck, I think I had the wrong focus in choosing my word, right? But I think I also was focused too much on like having something that felt powerful, that felt big, that felt, like it was going to really drive me to change. And last year, maybe I will tell you my word of the year last year. Last year, my word wasn't about trying to be a catalyst for change. Last year was more about a year of accepting what I'm given and living with what I'm given the way I want to live. And when I leaned into that, and when things came up for me, and some big things came up for me in 2024, when those things came up for me and I was asking myself all kinds of questions like, well, now what? What do I do now? I would stop and think about my word of the year. And it immediately brought me peace because then I knew exactly what I needed to do. I knew how I wanted to be living my life that year. And so then I was able to look for opportunities to do so. And I was able to have some faith that those opportunities were going to present themselves if I was just open to them. And if I was, keeping an open heart to that. So when you're looking to choose your word of the year, I want to encourage you to reflect on the past year. Reflect on, have you ever chosen a word of the year before? Did it work out for you? Did you hold on to it for the whole year? And here's another little side note. You don't have to hold on to a single word of the year for a year. Sometimes there's going to be years where you still might have a great word of the year that's really helping to solidify how you want to live. That doesn't mean that couldn't change for you. That also doesn't mean that the second the calendar flips to 2026 that you have to change your word of the year. And I really thought long and hard about that this past calendar flip. I was like, do I even want to change my word of the year? Because my word in 2024 had resonated so deeply for me. And I ended up choosing a different word this year because I wanted to tweak my focus a little bit. I want to live just a little bit differently in 2025. So I want to keep my word of the year from 2024 with me, but I just kind of tweaked the focus. So reflecting on your past years can be really helpful. Absolutely be identifying what those core priorities are for you. What's most important to you in, the who and the what and the how. be sure that you know what those are, because that's what helps you to set intentions and to create this vision for what you want to feel, what you want to focus on, how you want to show up every single day. Then I want you to grab a piece of paper and I want you to brainstorm words. Anything that comes to mind as you've been thinking about this and reflecting on this, thinking about your intentions, thinking about your priorities, thinking about 2025 and the year ahead. Put expectation aside and just let those words flow. Even if a word comes out and you're like, nah, that's not it. And it doesn't matter. If that word comes to you, it might have a purpose in helping you get to the word that you need to get to. So write it down. Words, short phrases, anything like that that comes to mind, write it down. Okay, and then you can go through that list and narrow it down. Words that don't feel right, words that don't encompass exactly what you're going for and how you want to live this year, right? And see if you can come down. Maybe that word is going to be there on your piece of paper. Maybe something new is going to come to you. Okay, and I want you maybe to consider, although I don't, I'm torn here. I think a lot of times picking a word of the year, and I mentioned fell into this pitfall a little bit where I picked a word, that I thought sounded powerful. So if somebody asked me what my word of the year was, I felt proud of that word, or I felt like the word was self-explanatory. Your word doesn't have to be self-explanatory. It needs to mean something to you. Your word doesn't need to mean anything to anyone else. And whether you choose to share it with anyone else, totally up to you. But, maybe staying away from, I would encourage you to stay away from words that feel, what's the word I'm looking for? Too big, too kind of woo, if you know what I mean. Like, make sure your word is focused in. Know what your priorities and intentions are in choosing that word, and know what that word means to you in terms of those priorities. Okay. From there, maybe you want to use your word to create a sort of mantra or a daily affirmation that you say to yourself. If you journal, you could write it in your journal. If you keep a planner, you could write it in your planner. Just allowing yourself to really let that word sink in for a while and really become a part of your thinking. And that is, oh my gosh, that plays a huge role then when you are trying to purposefully keep this word front of mind. That's going to help keep your thoughts, your decision making, everything focused in the direction that you want it to be focused. Okay, maybe you want to display it prominently somewhere. Maybe you want to put it on your phone wallpaper so that you see it. Whatever works for you. Okay. And then if you are someone who needs some additional reflection, if you like to meditate, you can find ways to incorporate your word of the year into other routines of your life to help it kind of assimilate into your daily life a little bit easier. And as I mentioned before, it's okay if you decide to shift your focus at some point during the year. If suddenly the word that you chose is no longer feeling like it's resonating for you, like it's relevant for you, whether that means something else comes up for you and you feel like, ooh, maybe this should have been my word of the year. I feel like you have to wait till 2026 to change your word of the year, right? Go for it now. But at the same time, allow yourself to be flexible, allow yourself to be compassionate with the process, and allow yourself to share as much as you are willing to share. Speaking of sharing and the Facebook community, I'd love for you to come on over. Come on over and share with us. If you choose a word of the year, share with us what your 2025 word of the year is. You can share with us if you've chosen a word of the year in the past and it worked out really well in helping guide you for the year. I'd love to hear your stories about that as well. But I'll leave you just by telling you that my word of the year for 2025 is honor, and that I want to honor myself, honor my priorities, honor my family, and honor the things in my life that are most important to me. And I hope that you, my friend, will do the same. Have an amazing day. Come on over and join us in the Facebook community. And I'll see you all next week on another episode of the Declutter 360 podcast. Thank you for tuning into the Declutter 360 podcast today. I am so grateful that you found me and that we can partner together to help you live life organized from all angles. Whether this was your first time listening or you've heard every episode, you'll want to join my email list so you don't miss a bit of the inspiration and motivation to help you stay the course in living organized. Check the show notes for the link to join, okay? And hey, if you found this episode to be particularly helpful or inspiring, I would be so honored for you to share it on socials so we can grow the impact of these messages together. Oh, thank you so much. All right, my friend, that's all for now. Tune in next week for more on the Declutter 360 podcast.